All right. So today we speak with Nicole Valadez. She is a co-founder at Trill Multicultural, an agency that exists to give its clients authentic cutting-edge strategy for the emerging multicultural majority. Through flawless marketing and communication in the multicultural space, they deliver a lasting social impact that dilutes stereotypes, enforces the right narrative, and empowers people. Welcome to the Activate Your Audience podcast, Nicole.
Thank you for having me, Luis.
Our pleasure. So we touched base on just how we drive consumer experiences through some of our projects, how we design those, and kind of creating empowering narratives. So if you don't mind, could you start with maybe giving a brief background on Trill Multicultural, maybe your background and business model as it pertains to your guys' projects and work?
Absolutely. So Trill Multicultural was started in 2015, officially kicked off in 2016. And we created the firm with one simple idea in mind, and that's that our mission was always going to be centered on elevating, uplifting, and telling the stories of multicultural communities. And so we took that very simple proposition and made sure that the clients that we engaged with and that we continue to engage with today are aligned with that same thing. I think that's a key, essential component to make sure that we can accomplish a mutually beneficial goal. And that's going to make us really passionate about the work. And so we're an entirely virtual firm. Our team works everywhere from LA to San Francisco to Dallas, Houston, Miami, and on the East Coast as well. We really focus our intentions as we develop our new business, as we seek new clients, and as we engage with the ones that we have today, like Foot Locker. We work in kind of a very wide range of industries, from apparel to large national nonprofits and philanthropy organizations. So our mission of elevating those multicultural communities and having that focus at the center of our work guides us in our work, in the clients that we select. If the client's mission is just to sell a product, then they're not a good fit for us, and we wouldn't be a good fit for them. That's not what gets us out of bed in the morning. And so I think that first and foremost is a really key part of our success, and how we've been able to work with brands who, like Foot Locker, for example, who do understand that in order to accomplish their ultimate goal of selling more shoes, they have to tell the stories of the people who walk in them, right? That's a great client for us. I think the way of doing business that once existed, or I'm sure still exists, and no knock on this, but you land big accounts and you have big brand logos on your website, and that's the measure of success.
Right.
But we very much aren't concerned with those things. We are concerned about making sure that the work has purpose, and that the clients are also aligned with that. So that's a little bit of our work. We're a full purpose agency with all the traditional marketing capabilities and capacities. But we like to say that we're a full community service firm. So in everything that we do, we're focused on the people, focused on uplifting our stories, focusing on guiding our clients to make a positive impact with their resources in the communities that need it most.
That makes sense. And I love that. And a lot of, as you mentioned, firms that don't start with that either because of, especially larger firms, again, not to knock it, everybody has their own purpose, their own kind of business model, but it is something that maybe they will take into account, the purpose side of it, the impact, the community side of it, when it's a buzzword, right? When it's like trending. Yeah. So what kind of, maybe personally or even for the company culture or even with clients, what made you reverse engineer, which is actually the right way, instead of doing that on the back end, of starting with purpose and then creating kind of your guys' culture and model around that?
That's a good question. And I think the answer is more personal than business focused, to be honest. I think that our team, my business partner and I, we are we come from humble beginnings. So my dad immigrated from Mexico, from Monterrey, and came to this country not speaking any English, and he built a successful business, and he achieved things that I have had a goal of, like, okay, he achieved this level, I have to achieve something even greater because
Yeah.
of the tools that he's given me and my privilege of being born in this country. um so and my business partner has his own humble beginning story. He lived in like small town, and he went from Rosenberg, Texas, tiny town, to Washington D.C., and really like cut his teeth out there on the hill, and did amazing things, and has an incredible career story of his own. But we come from that very humble start, and so the idea of um steering away or veering away from our people, from our communities, from telling those stories, from trying to do good in the work that we do, just doesn't make sense for us. Like, we really want to do something with our talents and with the privilege we've been given to be in these positions that we are in now, to do something with it that's positive. And I think we're not afraid of, like, we say this all the time, and it's like a terrible thing to say as a business person, but we're not concerned with the dollar figure. Like, of course, the business has to make sense for us to take on an account. But that, like, the big dollar amounts don't draw us if the mission isn't there, because, as people, we have to wake up in the morning and feel excited about the work that we're going to do in order to give it 100%. And we're very much not the type of group that can do that unless we know that we're achieving something greater than just a dollar figure. And so it just makes sense for us as who we are as people. The money alone doesn't excite us. It has to have a greater purpose.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And with a lot of, an immigrant myself, I was actually born in Colombia, and having that sort of fire that lit us from our parents, or from, the knowing what, as you mentioned, privilege and opportunity we have, and really taking responsibility, I think is a huge value add for our clients and for, the end consumers. Because as you mentioned, at the end of the day, like, we're not only activating an audience, we're not only activating, supporting our clients' marketing and sales initiatives. Like, we are essentially bringing ourselves and our best selves, and as a company. And the only way that that's possible, like anything, is if we are believers in it. If I'm going to sell a product, if I'm going to push anything, I need to believe in this thing. And so I think that makes absolute sense, tying it obviously to the origin stories of where we come from naturally. Having that sort of implanted in us is actually a somewhat, I don't want to say tangible, but it is a transferable, unique value add, because we come from that sort of perspective, not just in speaking to that, say the Hispanic, the multicultural audience, but just that flavor of, the dynamic that is communicating with that sort of thing. It excites, it brings a different energy that it's, again, hard to quantify, but it is a very real thing that clients benefit from. Wouldn't you say?
100%. I think that there's a unique perspective that comes um, with a humble beginning. Like, you have the experiences, the proximity to community. Like, I grew up playing in the flea market when I was a little kid, because my parents had like that was like their first venture into entrepreneurship, is to have like a concession stand.
Yeah.
The very first thing they did. Um, and I had that experience, and then I had the experience of being able to see my dad succeed and like grow his construction business to a very successful place, and the privilege of getting a college education and getting into the right spots, and a little bit of luck and a lot of hard work, to get to working with some of the biggest corporations and organizations in the country. And it's kind of it's a dream. And with all that long journey, you get to experience the world in such a unique way that I don't think it's like it's a secret key that we have. And it absolutely benefits our clients in tangible and intangible ways.
For sure. And even like now kind of taking it both on that lane with you as a professional and as part of a team, especially a virtual team or, a team that is spread out throughout the nation. What have you learned is maybe the best way for both leveling up for yourself, for your company, and also meeting clients' needs? Sometimes, we understand the process of working in versus on the business, within team dynamics. Is there any learnings that maybe our audience can take away from your experience of how you level up, meet client needs, and help them in leveling up both as a company and individually?
I think we lean into, for us, I think every firm, every agency has like an X factor, right? We all bring something unique to the table, because if you look at objectively, we all have the same access to technology. We all have the labor force is incredibly saturated with so much talent that we all have it within our firms and our teams. So the lines of differentiation in this space are thin. They're very, very thin. And so what we commit to is story and understanding story structure. And I know that was a term that it was a buzz term, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago now, where they were calling themselves storytellers. So it's not something that we, totally push out in every piece of marketing that we put out, but it is something that really guides our work. And it's not just to say that we're storytellers, because anybody can tell a story, right? But we are really students of story and understanding the elements of story structure. And we know that there is a hero, and we know that there is a guide that the hero encounters on a journey. And the action that leads them to success or failure results from that. So that we apply to telling a brand story. And we apply it to everything from the way that we develop programs to the way that we tell a story on a video, whether it's a shoot for an apparel company or we're developing a corporate social responsibility program for a telecommunications corporation. It doesn't matter. I think the elements of story and, applying that to all marketing in a strategic, scientific way almost is one of our X factors is that. And, too often companies will make themselves the hero in the story. And we know that doesn't work. They're not the hero. The customer is the hero. The person they're trying to serve is the hero. And so helping adjust those perspectives and in our approach, making sure that our clients position themselves as the guide and really centers the customer and everything they do, or centers the stakeholder that they seek to serve in everything that they do. So I think that's one of the ways that we've been able to achieve that leveling up and accomplishing the client's mission while still keeping that very human, people-focused lens that we hold so close.
That's huge. Yeah, I think, from multiple levels, what I'm hearing is that you have found the anchor on what is the main thing. So obviously initially with the mission, and now in terms of even leveling up, this anchor of focusing on what matters most. As marketers, as communicators, yes, there is an old formula. We're humans, we have certain triggers, right? And so it would be, and it happens, right? It's very selfish and I think maybe human for us to, as business, as leaders, to place ourselves in that hero role. But as you mentioned, if you understand the story structure and the power of that and the discipline too that it takes to just have this, again, not focus on just the main thing, which is if we're going to deliver value for multicultural communities, if we're only going to work with mission-aligned clients, but then if we're also going to direct both our clients and ourselves internally and as a product, as a service, to follow that structure does take, again, being very clear about what you're anchoring to, what matters, what the main thing is. So that makes sense. Why wouldn't a team and a client and a campaign work if there is such clarity? And what are the vehicles to that? Brand story is obviously one of the most powerful ones. And it has been, kind of buzzword, and it does get kind of bastardized, I think. It's coming back again, just being used. And it's more of, I think, depth of knowledge as we apply it to ourselves, apply it to our own narratives, right? A lot of the times, the premise, I think, initially or behind the activating our audience, at least for this podcast, was that we need to activate ourselves. And how do humans learn? We know this through stories, right? That's how we communicate. That's how we best learn. So it's I think, very important thing. And that's a great hack, if you could call it that, for leveling up, of just understanding what a story structure is for yourself and following a purposeful mission. And then how does that scale or then amplify to, say, your family, your community, the people you care for, then your business, your clients, the world. So that makes absolute sense.
And the best brands do it well, right? You look at a brand like Nike, which I think we all aspire to work with someday, right? They just do it the best. They just released some content with the Denver Nuggets MVP, Nikola Jokic, and the content told a joke with a very sincere tone, and it starts with like, so a Serbian guy walks into an arena, and it goes on to say he wins an MVP, he wins another one, then he wins a championship. That's it. That's the story. No punchline, no joke. Yeah. It's just so simple. And you look at Nike's main bread and butter, it's to sell apparel, to sell shoes, right? Nowhere in there does it talk about that. Nowhere in there does it talk about the product. They are uplifting a hero. They're uplifting somebody who is very unassuming, who is very, for as much as he's achieved, if you look at the guy, he just looks like, he feels like anybody, like you or me. And so I think being able to get that kind of idea applied of your brand is not the hero, it's the guide, and uplifting the heroes, whether it's in a campaign like that for Nike or in a corporate social responsibility strategy of how do you, like, say that there's a brand that wants to tackle education inequities in multicultural communities, pour into the local heroes who are already doing that work, right? Uplift their stories so that people know about them, so that people hear the messages and people know of the folks doing this work already, versus coming in and kind of pounding your chest and be like, look at this donation and the big check. So I think, consumers are over it, brands know it. And so leaning into this idea of like, we are not the hero, you're the hero, that's going to be a winning combination every time.
I agree. And now, since you mentioned it, talking about social impact, and how it tells powerful stories for, obviously improving communities. And as you mentioned, that beautiful example of like, not only helping bring voices to the forefront or aligning, not just speaking from the top down, but being within the community. What would you say is your approach? And I know it's something you touched on before already, but to, I guess, value creation for both the community and the client. Can you dig into that a little bit deeper?
Yeah. So when you think about it from an events perspective, we had a client that approached us to help them come into a community where there was an incredible amount of resistance to this major corporation entering the space. And so the idea, luckily, our clients were very much of the same mind as us, right? So we knew that we had to come in with a community first approach and uplifting the people who are doing incredible work in the area of, in this case, one of the issues was food insecurity and a food desert, right? So we leaned in hard and said, who are the stakeholders in this community who are fighting this fight already? Let's give them a platform. Let's give them a voice. Let's give them even an advisory role and compensation that help us make sure that we're accounting for the issues of this community, to help us understand the issues so that not just in the moment of like this grand opening, but moving forward programmatically, what can we do? What can we offer? What pillars do we have to keep in mind to serve this community? So it's not just a one and done. It's an authentic commitment moving forward. And so I think that's a key part, is like tapping into the people, the heroes that the community already has, uplifting those stories, compensating people for their expertise, because that's a key thing that you can't forego. We all, being part of our communities, have expertise and we should be compensated for that. So tapping in with those groups and, again, making it not a one and done experience, but a longer term commitment. to really understanding the issues of the community, and really caring for those partnerships long term.
I love that. Yeah, there's always like and this has been a through line through various conversations when we talk about leverage points, within business and within um, offerings and execution, both from our journey as entrepreneurs. We know we need leverage for maximizing our effort, but oftentimes with these campaigns, specifically if we are very invested in our client's success, as we should be, it's important to know that the effort that we put in is going to have multiples in return, not just for their ROI spend, which every business can promise a return on investment. But I think that example as well just showcases that not only do we have this sort of kind of wheel of, what would you call that? It's not even karma, but just like, I guess it's some sort of goodwill, but perpetuity of, if we are obviously, investing in the community, if we're investing in, and as you mentioned, compensating folks who are experts in their field, that is obviously going to keep providing that return on investment and create the leverage where this one opening, these 2 or 3 events are going to speak volumes versus throwing a ton of money at just the surface level things, ignoring the community, or just doing the one and done, as you mentioned, PR phase, instead of just really, let me allocate this capital, let me be in it, which takes a little bit more intention, but it's really like the same amount of effort. And again, if we're talking leverage, the return on that is massive. And I think the beauty, especially in our industry within events, activation, marketing in general, where I would speak more maybe to like the events field, there used to not be ROI on that, but now because of, new technology and what is being tracked, not just digitally with algorithm or with digital analytics, I mean, but with the ability that we can track it, we are seeing how much that return is valuable. So I think that's a huge point to highlight. And with that, what would you say is maybe some of your guys' best practices, or personally, that you could offer for brands? So we talked brand story and some of that, but do you have any kind of go-tos or easy, not easy, but just like tools that you would share with, if you're consulting somebody, or if you want to help any brand kind of begin to use some of these communication, I don't want to say tactics, but just best practices with that kind of intention in mind?
Yeah, I think it starts with we can't execute authentic programming, and we can't forge these long-term partnerships in community, and we can't display that long line commitment if we don't have the clients in place who see the value in that, right? If we don't have the clients in place who understand multicultural communities. So it starts with organizations lifting up the voices, respecting the expertise, and lifting up the talents of multicultural employees to decision-making and leadership positions. If we don't have clients that understand that our communities are not going to be wowed by the flashy PR moment, our communities want to see real and true commitment long term. If we don't have that client that walks that line with us, then we can't be successful, and they can't be successful. The ultimate goal of moving a product or a value proposition in community is not going to be successful. So the leadership makeup of an organization has to reflect the faces of the customers and the stakeholders that they want to reach. And that's not a new thought. It's not an original thought or idea, but it's a very logical step when you think about it. But if you look at the Fortune 500, there's 20 Latino CEOs, right? And we make up 4% of the board seats. So while this is like just logical common sense, I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. As organizations express their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is, the buzzwords of the moment, make sure that they're upholding those values inside of their house. Because if you want to reach multicultural audiences, you have to have that expertise. You have to value that expertise, respect it, and make sure that you have the right people in place, the right people at the table. So I think that's one thing. And then again, tapping into the subject matter expertise externally. So you have it built internally, and then connecting that with the external subject matter expertise in community that are doing the work, that live and breathe the missions that you're trying to, the missions of, the missions to help the communities that you're seeking to reach. So make the investment, prioritize it, prioritize your financial resources, your talent towards towards the goal of reaching multicultural audiences and serving them. I think that's the secret.
That's so true. And it's like, it's a secret because folks may not necessarily follow it from an organizational perspective, but it's like common sense too. Like, it's not a secret that if you serve people instead of just take from them, why wouldn't that create that perpetuity that we talked about, right? Like, why wouldn't I be a fan of your brand, of your product, of your company, of the mission overall, if I see that you're invested? So that makes total sense. I'm going to kind of highlight what we talked about, and please fill in anything else that maybe I might have missed or anything you want to add. So initially, the purpose first was kind of a way to not only differentiate, but also to activate not only ourselves, but our audience. So I think that's a great idea to remember, the anchor to the main thing. Next, I would say being a student of stories. I love that line. And just delivering on your mission, again, is something that keeps you focused by not just following what is trendy or just saying that you're, placing yourself in this role as a guide, but actually following the structure that has worked both for you, for your client, and for your team is a massive point for continuing evolution. Leveraging, again, as we mentioned, that not only just investing in the communities and in the mission are authentic and are the right thing to do and do help the bottom line, but you're also providing more return on that investment by using people's expertise, using the kind of alignment to the mission, and again, in more of a proper way, instead of just use and abuse, but of partnership, right? Of really being in it. Is there anything else you would add to that?
Yeah, I think that covers it. The time for performative commitment to multicultural communities and to trying to take our dollars without actually investing in our communities is over. I think brands know that. The smart ones are making the shift. And without that, I don't think anybody can see lasting success. I mean, customers' eyes are wide open these days, and they want to see true action, true commitment, and they want to see that the values of the brands that they're spending their hard-earned dollars on reflect their own too. So that's the last thing I would add. I think that kind of encapsulates to how we feel and think. We're very passionate about social justice, and Rolando has a great story of activism, and I have one to tell of my own. So I think having that focus on making a true positive impact, making sure that the brands we work with have that intention too, is what keeps us, doing this crazy thing that we call entrepreneurship and not giving up.
Yeah, no, that's a great way, I think, to just underline what is kind of the hero journey internally, and what is the not necessarily an underdog story, but even like the American dream, right? Of creating this sort of rise from what is our true essence as a country, as a community, which is this diversity, which is this sort of activism. This is how we started as a nation, right? And we decided to stand for something that were aligned to values and to people's freedom. And obviously it's gone different ways since then, but that's at the core of what this nation is built for. And that's at the core of entrepreneurship. And you could argue that's at the core of mass communication, right? Of how do we align and tell stories to people like us, who align like us, who will either support a product, a business, an idea, because we do bring not only this diverse knowledge and proper representation, but also because we have this sort of, I think, eternal, or I should say, like, it's a forever interesting story. The underdog coming up, the fight, the set up against the odds, like, because that's life, right? Like, life sometimes can be hard and things are challenging. It's also beautiful and rewarding. But I love that Trill Multicultural has kind of like built on that. And if you don't mind sharing, is there anything, because I can't let you speak about your story of activism and maybe not share it, is there anything that you'd like to share on that, of what is kind of been your journey with that and how maybe it entails to you personally or to the business?
Um, yeah, I think, I never want to like I hesitate to represent that work because there's so many people who do it every day, and like that is their commitment in life. That is what they
Yeah.
do for their job. That is what they do day in and day out. They live and breathe it, which is an incredibly difficult thing to do. When the social justice resurgence happened, at the start of the pandemic, and there was so much happening, so much turmoil, so much injustice taking place. And I think, we were all watching in horror and outraged and yelling into our phones about how upset we were. But it was very difficult for even me to think about, what can I do to change this? What can I do to raise my voice beyond Twitter and Instagram about what I think is wrong, and
Right.
how it's how do we take action? How do we do something? And so in that moment, we created something called the Activist Boot Camp, which helped people understand different issues and then take action against them. So we did a different series for the very tragic and horrific stories of Breonna Taylor and how to take action for George Floyd. And so we gave people very specific action steps, even a script of what to say when you call representatives on a local and national scale, um, where to go to find more information, just giving them a step 1, 2, 3, and showing them how to do it. Again, reflecting a very normal person like me being on the phone, calling a representative and leaving a voicemail about an issue,
Yeah.
empowered so many people to do the same. That was a really incredible experience to be a part of. A lot of weight and responsibility comes with that. Again, I think it takes a very special, strong individual to make this their life mission. It's something that I paused on for the sake of just mental health and being well. It's very taxing, emotional work.
Yeah.
But it's something that is still at the forefront of my mind. Something that I want to revive and bring back, because uh, people care in a way that and their eyes are open in a way that I don't think we really had that over the last like decade or two, right? It's like our eyes are so open now to all the things that are wrong. And so many of our communities are under attack. So people have that fight in them to say, I'm not going to stand for this. I'm not going to stand for police brutality. I'm not going to stand for somebody getting murdered in the street because of the color of their skin. I'm not going to stand for any of this. And so I feel like that power is still there, and not continuing that series is a disservice to the world, to our country. Not for us to not use our voices is a disservice. So it's been on a pause, but hopefully I can bring it back in the next year or so. But that fight and that care for community exists regardless of whether that's active or not. And it exists in the way that we approach our work, and in the way that we pick our clients, to make sure that we're working with folks who are aligned with our views and our values about our communities.
That's massive. No, thank you. And I think a good reminder, and to even tie in what you mentioned earlier, like folks are awake, right? Like end consumers in general, right? The education of what we know is being fed to us, we're much harder to brainwash. Not that it's still not possible, right? From marketing and communication, but as a community, especially in some of these recent resurgence of just awareness, things that we've known, things that communities have known, things that maybe the nation turn a blind eye on injustices. But it's like once you're awake, yes, you can go back to sleep to some extent. And so what does that mean? On one hand, I think, people can numb out again. The powers that be, I don't believe that there's this big conspiracy per se, but there are systems and processes that do continue to oppress, I think, more systematically than maliciously oftentimes, right? Not that again, there's not some malice in that. But what does that mean for us is I love what you did, and what at the core of it is, how do we act on it, right? How do we recognize that if you are saying to a mission or a cause for writing something that is wrong, or at least helping support a message, how can you give people actions for it? And the same thing as a consumer, if I'm going to if I'm going to spend my hard-earned dollars, if I want to support something, how do I ignore the fact that I know certain things about this? Like, you just can't. And the most important part is the action bit. And I think providing that sort of guidance and that sort of tool is massive, because all of us can, as you mentioned, tweet about it, Instagram about it, do all the surface level things that make us feel good or just make us, pop up on the feed. But it's not important. It doesn't mean anything unless we're doing something about it and activating people, as we do both for business, for, capitalistic reasons, should also be applied for community reasons and for the soul of our country and for our purpose, specifically as we started this, the privilege that we have and the background that we understand. So I think that's massive. And I'll just remind, both you and I and anybody listening, that we don't always need to be in, I think, the activist role per se. As you mentioned, that is a hard and that is a very unique thing. It's very important. We do need people to rise and take that. And anytime that we can take action, that's what will matter. Any action, right? Small or big, consistent, persistent action. But sometimes our action is being the best leader that we can be, funneling our dollars into these supportive missions. And again, not just paying with a dollar, paying with action, choosing the clients, as you say. And that is enough of our own activism in a way for mental health, for what is, I think, again, focused on our main thing, because it can be distractive. And I think with good intentions, we can counteract. And I'm speaking from personal experience, where we see all of this, so we think we need to do that. Again, if you're called to it, call it. But also don't ignore your work. Don't ignore what matters and where your lane is, that you can have the biggest impact to support people like that. So that's just, I think, important, to highlight within that realm that sometimes crosses obviously into business and just the trending topics.
I really like that idea because it's hard, right? It's like life is hard. We all have a full plate. We have work, we have families, we have so much on our plate that I think the reason people do become numb is they tend to not have the capacity for the rage and the hurt that exists when you see injustice taking place. And that's understandable. And it happened to me, right? I felt that overwhelming burden of it, and I felt like I needed to get out from under it. But there's ways for sure. You don't have to be in the living and breathing in the world of activism. How do we find ways to make sure that the way that we're spending our time, the way that we're giving of our talent is to the right places, is to the people, to the right clients who also are aligned with those values, who are putting very real investment into community, into helping tackle inequities, it in a small way or a big way. That is in and of itself a great way for us to make a difference. So I really appreciate that perspective.
For sure. No, you're so right. So, man, this has been an awesome episode. Thank you so much for sharing. Where can people learn more about, support what you got going on, check out more about Trill Multicultural and yourself?
Yeah, Instagram is a great place to go and see our work. You could find us at Trill Multicultural. That's a great avenue, and our website's linked there. We get to showcase a lot of our external facing work on that platform. And then the internal work for internal communications, employee engagement, corporate social responsibility is a little bit more hidden. But I'd say Instagram's a great place to at least connect with us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Looking forward to our next chat, and Appreciate all the gems.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.